What if the world's richest man gave it all up, just to play piano in a dusty dive bar? That was the opening line of the viral video. 20 seconds of raw, grainy footage, shot vertically on someone's phone, that turned the internet upside down. The camera panned over a dimly lit bar somewhere in Austin, Texas. A man, dressed in a plain gray hoodie and jeans, sat at an old upright piano. His face was partially hidden beneath a Dodgers cap, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The internet had theories, of course, body doubles, deep fakes, performance art. But none of that mattered. Because the man in the video, he played the piano like it held the secrets of the universe. That night had started like any other Friday at the Rusty Nail, a hole-in-the-wall joint known for warm beer, cold floors, and a beat-up baby grand that hadn't been tuned since Obama's first term. Ava Kensington was not supposed to be there. She was just in Austin for the weekend, some friend's tech launch after-party, a pre-game for a more exclusive club opening. But boredom struck, and someone dared her to slum it at the most low-key spot on 6th Street. So there she was, Balenciaga boots clicking against sticky wood floors, surrounded by people who looked like they hadn't heard of skincare since puberty. God, this place smells like regrets and expired dreams, Ava muttered, sliding into a booth with her entourage. Phones out. Stories up. Fake smiles locked and loaded. That's when he walked in. Tall. Quiet. Hoodie up. No entourage. Just a man with a purpose. He didn't order a drink. He didn't look around. He walked straight to the piano, cracked his knuckles, and sat. A few people barely looked up. Until he started playing. The first notes were simple. Haunting. A progression in D minor that felt like dusk falling over a quiet desert. Then it built, melodies weaving into each other like waves of memory crashing against stone. It wasn't just music. It was emotion, raw and unfiltered, pouring from his fingers like he was bleeding thoughts he couldn't say out loud. The room froze. Bartenders stopped mid-pour. A couple on the verge of arguing forgot what they were mad about. Someone dropped a glass, but no one even turned to look. Even Ava looked up from her phone. Is this Chopin? Someone whispered. No, the bartender said. I think, he made that up. The man never looked up. Never spoke. He just played. Ava tried to roll her eyes. Tried to scoff. But something inside her tightened. She'd been raised on Mozart and Bach. Private lessons with Juilliard alumni. Her mother once threw a tantrum because the family Steinway was a week late in shipping. But this was different. There was pain in it. And it pissed her off. It's not that hard to sound deep when you're playing sad notes, she said too loudly. The man stopped. For the first time, he looked up. And for a brief second, the room collectively held its breath. Because even through the shadows and the beard stubble and the hoodie, he looked exactly like Elon Musk. Ava smirked. Wait, is this, like, some kind of cosplay? No response. You know, impersonating a billionaire is a federal offense. Still, nothing. Just that quiet, unreadable gaze. Her friends snickered. One pulled out a phone and whispered, Yo, Ava, you should totally challenge him. You studied under that Russian guy, remember? What's his name? Sergey. Ava stood up, flipping her hair dramatically. He called me a prodigy. Then show him. Gladly. She marched up to the piano, sliding in beside him like she owned the world. Her diamond bracelets jingled louder than her confidence. Mind if I take a turn? She asked sweetly. He stood. Wordlessly. And stepped back. Great. She cracked her fingers, made a show of stretching her neck, and began playing something fast, Liszt-inspired, flashy, technically impressive. The kind of piece that screamed, look what I can do. But something was missing. Something crucial. Emotion. When she finished, the bar gave polite claps. No one gasped. No one dropped a glass this time. The man just tilted his head. Then, slowly, he sat back down. He didn't say anything. He didn't even look at her. He just played. This time, the music was darker. Deeper. It felt like falling and flying at once. And then, halfway through, something changed. He began to build on what Ava had played, echoing her flourishes, reimagining them. He took her sterile brilliance and poured life into it. It was like watching someone repaint a perfect but lifeless portrait and turn it into something human. When he finished, no one clapped. They just sat there. Stunned. Ava stared at the keys. For the first time in her life, her money, her name, her training, none of it meant anything. He didn't say a word. Just stood. And walked out. The door creaked shut behind him. Someone finally exhaled. A chair scraped. A glass clinked. Was that? It couldn't be. Right? But Ava wasn't listening. She was already pulling out her phone, searching for clues. She had to know who he was. Because whoever that man was, he just made her feel more seen, and more small, than anyone ever had. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? If you asked Ava Kensington who she was, she'd tell you 3 things. She was born into money. She had earned her status. And she wasn't afraid of anyone. But if you asked anyone who actually knew her, they'd probably just roll their eyes. Ava was the kind of girl who didn't walk into a room, she entered like it was a red carpet. Raised in a 12-bedroom Beverly Hills estate with 2 swimming pools, a panic room, and a chef who once catered for Beyoncé, Ava never knew a world where things weren't handed to her on a sterling silver platter. Her father, Charles Kensington III, ran a hedge fund that practically printed money. Her mother, Veronica, ran the social calendar of every elite circle on the West Coast. Ava? She ran through boyfriends, brunch spots, and luxury brands with ruthless efficiency. By 18, she'd already been labeled an "it girl" by Vanity Fair. By 21, she'd launched a failed fashion app that lost millions but somehow landed her a Vogue spread anyway. She always had a fallback plan, because when your net worth begins with a B, failure is just a tax write-off. But what no one really knew, what even Ava herself hadn't admitted out loud, was that she was terrified of being invisible. Her piano lessons had started when she was 5. Not because she loved music, but because her mother wanted her to seem more cultured. Ava was naturally gifted, yes. But that wasn't enough. Sergei Malkovich, the Russian maestro with the icy glare and whiskey breath, took her under his wing. He didn't teach her to love music. He taught her to dominate it. To perform like it was a duel. To leave no room for mistakes or emotion. And Ava took that same approach to life. She'd been taught that vulnerability was weakness. That emotion was a liability. That winning wasn't enough, you had to look good doing it. But lately, the mask was slipping. After the whole piano incident at the Rusty Nail, something started to gnaw at her. Not just embarrassment, she could handle public humiliation. She'd gone viral for less. It was something deeper. A question she couldn't shake. Why did that hurt? Because it did hurt. More than it should have. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the man at the piano. The way he played. The way he said nothing but somehow spoke volumes. The way he took her showmanship and turned it into something real. And the way people looked at him, like he mattered. When Ava played, people clapped because they were supposed to. Because she was Ava Kensington. When he played, they forgot everything else. That following Monday, she was back in LA, pacing across the marble floors of her father's office suite, 12 stories above Rodeo Drive. Her oversized sunglasses were on, not for fashion this time, but to hide the bags under her eyes. She hadn't slept much. "Dad, you've worked with Elon Musk before, right?" she asked casually. Charles didn't even look up from his tablet. "Everyone in this town's worked with Musk." "Why?" "Just curious." "About what?" "That guy's off the grid. You know he hasn't tweeted in, like, a year. Probably living in a cave on Mars." Ava forced a laugh. But her fingers tapped anxiously on the armrest. "Right. Of course." She didn't bring up the video. Didn't mention the bar. Or how for the first time in her life, she'd felt utterly outclassed, not by another socialite, or model, or trust fund kid, but by a man in a hoodie playing an old piano in a bar that didn't even serve cocktails. That night, she sat on her penthouse balcony, scrolling through Reddit threads and YouTube comments on the viral clip titled, "Elon Musk plays haunting piano solo in Texas dive bar." Speculation was everywhere. Deepfake for sure. Elon doesn't have time for this. No way that's him, but damn, whoever it is plays like a god. And then one comment that stuck out. "I was there. It was real. I talked to him after. He said something weird. Music never lies. That's why I stopped talking." Ava stared at those words. Music never lies. Something in her chest twisted. Because her whole life, she had been lying through music. Using it to impress. To win. To silence the silence. She picked up her phone and hovered over Sergey's number. Then put it down. He couldn't help her with this. She didn't need a teacher. She needed to find him. By the end of the week, Ava had fired her assistant, cancelled her upcoming launch party, and ghosted her influencer friends. Her PR agent thought she was having a breakdown. Maybe she was. But she was done pretending. "I need to feel something," she whispered to herself one morning, staring into her bathroom mirror, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "And he's the only one who made me feel anything real in years." What started as curiosity became obsession. She hired a private investigator. Not one of the creepy tabloid types. A discreet, digital ghost hunter. She gave him only one clue, the video. Within 2 days, he called back. "We've got something. His name might not be Elon Musk, but he's been spotted playing at multiple bars across Austin. No phone. No online presence. Paid in cash. Real off-the-grid vibes." Ava's heart jumped. "Book me a flight." "You sure about this?" "I don't know what I'm sure about anymore." She didn't pack much. Just a carry-on bag, a pair of boots, and an old piano key necklace she hadn't worn since high school. For the first time in her life, she didn't need an entourage. She was going alone. To Texas. To find a man who may or may not be the world's richest person. And ask him to teach her how to play like that. The plane to Austin felt like the longest few hours of Ava's life. Every minute was filled with the unshakable sense that she was about to make a massive mistake. Or maybe a brilliant one. It wasn't entirely clear, but she didn't care. She just needed to get it over with. She didn't tell her father about the trip. Didn't mention it to anyone, really. Ava was always the one who made waves, the one who stood out. But now, she was determined to do something for herself, for once. She wanted to prove that she could do more than just flaunt her privilege. She needed to find that man, the one who had made her feel insignificant. He had done it with nothing but a few haunting notes and a quiet gaze. When the plane touched down in Austin, the warm Texas air hit her like a wall. She wasn't here for the luxury spas or the swanky hotels. She didn't need a driver in a limo. No, she needed something much more elusive, answers. And she was going to get them herself. Ava wasn't one to waste time. She checked into a low-key Airbnb, nothing too fancy but clean and close enough to the bars in downtown Austin. The private investigator had given her a list of places where the mysterious pianist had been spotted, but they were all vague mentions of dive bars and low-profile venues. No names, no guarantees. The first bar she tried was the Wobbly Piano, a dark, unassuming place that didn't even have a sign out front. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale beer and old leather. A small stage in the corner held a piano that looked as if it hadn't been tuned in decades. The bartender looked at her with a bored expression as she approached. "What's your drink?" Ava hesitated for a moment before replying, "Water." "Just water." The bartender raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. He turned and grabbed a glass of water from the tap. "You looking for someone?" he asked, sliding the glass toward her. Ava didn't respond immediately. She surveyed the room instead. The low hum of chatter filled the air, the occasional burst of laughter, but no music. Her heart began to pound in her chest. Was he here? Or was she chasing a ghost? "You know, there's a guy who plays piano here sometimes," the bartender said, his voice breaking her focus. Ava's eyes snapped to him. "When does he play?" He shrugged, wiping down the counter. "Hard to say. Shows up when he feels like it. No set schedule. But I'll tell you this, when he plays, you'll know." Ava leaned forward, her fingers wrapping around the glass as she tried to remain calm. "Why's that?" The bartender grinned. "Because he's good. And when he plays, it's like everything in here stops." Ava's mind raced. This was it. He had to be talking about him. She could feel her pulse quickening. She didn't care about the atmosphere or the people here. She just needed to find him. For hours, she sat at the bar, watching people come and go, hoping for any sign of the man who had captivated her. But as the evening stretched on, she began to feel a creeping sense of doubt. Maybe it was just a fluke, she muttered to herself, stirring her drink. Just as she was about to leave, the door opened, and a figure walked in. The room fell silent. Ava's breath caught in her throat. It was him. He didn't look exactly how she'd remembered him. The hoodie was gone, replaced by a worn leather jacket. His hair was messier than before, his face a little scruffier, but there was no mistaking it. He was the man from the bar in Austin. The pianist. The one who made her feel small. He glanced around the room briefly, then made his way toward the piano. There was no grand entrance, no announcement. Just a quiet confidence that made everyone take notice without him trying. He sat down at the piano, and just like that, the room went quiet again. It was as if the music was pulling everyone into its orbit. Ava couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was too focused on him, on the way his hands hovered over the keys for just a moment before he began to play. The music was soft at first, like a whisper in the darkness, but soon it grew. His fingers moved across the keys with fluidity and ease, weaving melodies that wrapped around her like a blanket. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just the technical brilliance she'd heard before. There was something deeper, something raw. The music felt like it was coming from a place of pain, of loss, of things he could never express with words. Ava didn't know how long she sat there, mesmerized by the music, but when it ended, the room stayed still for a beat longer than usual. The man stood and turned away from the piano, heading for the exit. Ava could feel the desperation building inside her. She stood up and followed him, making her way through the crowd with purpose. "Wait," she called out. He stopped but didn't turn around. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he clenched his fists before slowly, he faced her. Ava stood before him, her heart pounding. You're the one from the video." His eyes flickered for a moment, but he didn't say anything. "I need to talk to you," she continued, her voice softer now. "You don't know who I am, but I need to know how you did that. Why you did that." For the first time since she'd seen him, he smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. You really want to know? His voice was low, calm, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Ava didn't hesitate. Yes. I do. He nodded, his eyes locking onto hers. Then follow me. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the bar, heading down the street toward the unknown. Ava's heart raced as she followed him, unsure of what to expect next. Was this the moment she'd been waiting for? Was this where everything changed? She couldn't help but wonder, though, what would happen if the answers she found weren't the ones she was hoping for. The night air in Austin felt thick with anticipation as Ava followed him down the quiet street. The low hum of the city was distant, replaced by the sound of her own footsteps echoing against the pavement. She had no idea where he was leading her, but something about the way he moved, calm, measured, almost like he knew exactly where he was going, made her trust him. She tried to keep up, but he was moving at a steady pace, his strides long and sure, as if he wasn't concerned with anyone following him. He didn't turn around to check if she was still behind him, and Ava felt a slight pang of frustration. Was he doing this because he didn't care? Or because he was used to people following him? The street seemed to grow quieter the farther they walked. Ava's heels clicked on the sidewalk, the only sound that seemed to fill the space between them. Her mind raced, asking herself what she was doing here, following this mysterious man, when her life in LA felt like it was worlds away. But deep down, she knew. She needed answers. She had been chasing perfection her whole life, why not chase something real for once? After a few more blocks, he turned down an alley. Ava hesitated for a moment, but curiosity pushed her forward. The alley was narrow, with walls on either side that were graffitied with vibrant street art. It felt like the kind of place no one from her world would ever step foot in, a world of luxury, champagne flutes, and designer labels. But here, in this grimy alley in Austin, it felt like she was on the edge of something new, something unfamiliar. She glanced at him, and for the first time since she'd met him, she noticed how different he looked up close. The man who had played the piano in that dive bar wasn't just a genius at the keys, he had an air of mystery, a weight to him that seemed to exist beyond what he wore or what he said. There was something haunting in his eyes, a quiet intensity that made Ava's pulse quicken. He stopped in front of an old brick building, the kind that looked abandoned. There was a small sign on the door that read, "The Tuning Room." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "This is where I come to think." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Think?" He nodded and pushed open the door. The dim light from inside spilled out into the alley, casting shadows across the walls. "And sometimes play." Inside, the room was a far cry from the sleek, polished venues Ava was used to. It was simple. Raw. There was a single grand piano against one wall, but the rest of the room was filled with old furniture and mismatched chairs. The air smelled like dust and coffee, and Ava could hear the faint sound of the city's hum in the distance. It was a place that seemed both abandoned and alive, a place where secrets could be kept. He walked over to the piano, his fingers trailing lightly across the keys as if he was just testing them. He didn't look at her, didn't say a word. Ava stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. She had followed him this far, but now that they were here, the situation felt different. More real. After a few seconds, he turned to face her. "So, you want to know why I play?" Ava nodded, her heart in her throat. "Yes. I need to know. I need to understand how you do it." His eyes softened, just for a moment, before his gaze turned distant again. "I don't do it for you. Or for anyone else. I play because it's the only way I can tell the truth." Ava blinked, confused. "The truth?" He gestured to the piano, his voice low but steady. "Music doesn't lie. It doesn't have to hide. It doesn't need approval. It's pure. It says exactly what it means." Ava stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. "But how do you know that? How do you know what to say?" He was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then, with a soft sigh, he moved to sit at the piano. I don't always know. But that's the beauty of it. I just let it come out. The good, the bad, the ugly. It's all there in the music. You can't hide from it. Ava stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Her whole life had been about appearances, about crafting the perfect image, whether it was through social media or her public persona. She had built a life around not revealing anything true, anything vulnerable. It was all about control. But this man, he was different. He was raw. Honest. And that made him dangerous. He looked at her, almost as if he could read her thoughts. I know what you're thinking. Ava stiffened, suddenly feeling exposed. What am I thinking? He smiled faintly, a look that wasn't quite a smirk but more of a quiet acknowledgement. You're wondering why I don't care about the world you live in. Why I don't play by the same rules you do. She didn't answer, but the truth hung between them, undeniable. He gestured to the piano again. Play. Ava blinked, startled. What? He motioned impatiently. Play. Show me what you've got. If you want to understand why I play, then you need to understand what it means to let go. Let the music come from you, not from some curated image. Ava hesitated. She hadn't played a piano like this in years, not since the pressure to be perfect had consumed her life. She couldn't just sit down and play like this. Could she? But something inside her was urging her forward. Maybe it was his confidence, or the way he didn't judge her, but she felt an undeniable pull to prove herself. To let go. Slowly, she walked over to the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure at first. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed down on one key. Then another. And another. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. Each note was a bit of her, each pause a moment of hesitation. The music flowed slowly at first, but then it grew, becoming something more, something raw. She didn't care about the world outside, or the cameras, or the people who had always expected perfection from her. For the first time in her life, she was playing for herself. When she finally stopped, there was silence in the room. Ava felt exposed, vulnerable. But there was also something else. A sense of release. The man stood up and turned to her, his face unreadable. But this time, there was something different in his eyes. Approval? Maybe. Or maybe just understanding. You're getting there, he said quietly. Ava smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Thanks. As she left the tuning room that night, a new thought lingered in her mind. Maybe she didn't need to be perfect after all. Maybe the truth was enough. And just maybe, she had taken the first step toward finding herself. The next morning, Ava woke up with a sense of clarity that she hadn't felt in a long time. The city of Austin, with its bright blue skies and warm sunshine, felt different. She had come here to escape her life, but in the process, she had started to find herself. She had no idea what the man, he still hadn't told her his name, was really after, or what he was trying to teach her. But she knew one thing for sure, he had thrown down a challenge. You're getting there. The words echoed in her mind as she walked through the streets of Austin, still feeling the lingering effects of the music from the night before. That feeling of release, of freedom, was intoxicating. But it wasn't enough. She wasn't done. She needed more. She had been playing the role of a rich, privileged heiress for so long that she had forgotten what it was like to want something purely for herself. Last night, in that room, she had tapped into something real, something untouchable by fame or money. Ava wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was looking for a way to escape the image she had crafted for herself, an image that had suffocated her for years. But how could she make that break? How could she transform herself when every part of her world expected perfection? Later that day, Ava met up with the man again. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she hadn't anticipated feeling this nervous. It was as if the world had shifted beneath her feet since the night before. She had gone from playing for herself to wondering if she could show him that she wasn't just another rich girl, she was something more. Someone who didn't need the validation of her family or her followers. But as she arrived at the familiar building, she realized that this encounter wasn't going to be like the last one. There was something different in the air. A quiet tension, a challenge that she wasn't ready for. The man was standing outside the door of the tuning room, his back to her. His hands were buried deep in the pockets of his jacket, and he didn't turn around when he heard her approach. Ava cleared her throat. "I'm here." Without a word, he turned around slowly. His gaze was sharp, calculating. There was no smile on his lips this time, no warmth in his eyes. Just a quiet intensity that made her feel exposed. "You think you're ready?" His voice was low, almost like a dare. Ava swallowed, trying to keep her composure. "Ready for what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked her up and down, as if weighing something invisible in the air between them. The silence hung heavy, stretching between them until Ava felt her skin prickle with anticipation. "Ready for the challenge," he finally said, his voice soft but firm. "You want to break free from your perfect world. You want to learn how to be real. So let's see if you can handle the truth." Ava raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "The truth? What do you mean by that?" His lips twitched, just the smallest hint of a smile. "You've already started to find it, haven't you? But what happens when you stop playing for yourself? What happens when the music isn't just a release but a test of who you really are?" Ava frowned, confusion clouding her thoughts. "I don't understand." He took a step closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You'll understand soon enough." He motioned for her to follow him into the tuning room. The space felt different today, more somber, more serious. The piano, once a source of liberation, now seemed like an instrument of judgment. Ava walked in and stood near the piano, feeling a little out of place, like an actor who had walked onto a stage without knowing the lines. The man wasn't saying anything, just waiting for her to make the next move. "Sit down," he finally said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You've played before, but now we're going to see if you can play under pressure. Under the weight of truth." Ava's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean?" He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped to the side, revealing a row of people sitting in the back of the room, unseen, waiting. She hadn't noticed them before, and now she realized they were here for the same reason she was, to witness the challenge. The man gestured to the piano again. "You'll play. And the truth will come out." Ava's fingers hovered over the keys, uncertain. Her mind raced. Was this some kind of test? Or was he trying to break her down? The stakes had just escalated in ways she couldn't have predicted. But she had come this far. She couldn't back down now. She sat at the piano and placed her fingers lightly on the keys, breathing deeply. The room was silent except for the distant sound of a clock ticking somewhere. Every eye in the room was on her. For a moment, she couldn't bring herself to play. What was the right note? What was the truth she was supposed to reveal? And then, the man's voice broke through the silence. "Just play. Don't think. Just let it come from you." Ava closed her eyes and let her fingers fall onto the keys. The first note was shaky. The second was unsure. But soon, the music began to flow, hesitant at first, then gaining momentum. It was a melody born from uncertainty, a reflection of the walls she had built up around herself. The audience in the back of the room remained silent, but Ava could feel their eyes on her. She was no longer just playing for herself. She was playing for them. For the challenge. And for the man who had pushed her to this point. As the music swelled, Ava's heart began to race. She wasn't sure if she was playing to win their approval or to prove something to herself. But the music was no longer just a release, it was a test. A test of her ability to face the truth. The song ended with a final, triumphant chord, but the silence in the room remained. Ava opened her eyes slowly, unsure of what had just happened. The man stepped forward, his face unreadable. "You've played better," he said quietly. Her heart sank. "But you've also revealed more than you know." Ava sat there, stunned. She had expected applause. Validation. But instead, she had been met with quiet judgment. As she left the tuning room that night, Ava's mind raced. What had she learned? What had she revealed about herself? And more importantly, what would happen when the truth finally caught up with her? The days that followed Ava's unexpected challenge in the tuning room were filled with an unsettling quiet. The thrill of playing with such raw emotion had faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence she couldn't shake. She couldn't stop thinking about what the man had said. "You've revealed more than you know." The words stuck with her. What had she revealed? And why did it feel like something had shifted deep inside her, something she wasn't prepared for? It was as though the facade she had spent years building was slowly crumbling, piece by piece. She had always been the perfect daughter, the perfect heiress. A girl with flawless social media posts, glamorous events, and a life that everyone envied. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped being herself. Somewhere in the pursuit of perfection, she had lost her identity. The tuning room, with its rough edges and raw atmosphere, had forced her to confront what she had been avoiding for years. The music, that simple act of playing for herself, had opened a door she wasn't ready to walk through. But now, there was no turning back. Ava couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had been running away from something, someone, for far too long. Later that evening, Ava found herself standing in front of the large glass windows of her hotel room, staring out at the sparkling city below. The bustling streets of Austin seemed so far removed from her world back home in Los Angeles. The weight of her family's expectations, the pressure to always be perfect, felt distant but still heavy, like an invisible chain that kept her tethered to a life she no longer wanted. She turned away from the window and looked at the reflection in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, she didn't recognize the person staring back at her. The perfect image she had projected was fading, revealing someone she wasn't sure she liked, or even knew. The knock at her door startled her, and she quickly crossed the room to answer it. Standing in the doorway was the man, his usual impassive expression on his face. His eyes studied her, as if trying to gauge her emotions. "We need to talk." Ava's heart skipped a beat. About what? He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence dominating the small space. There was something commanding about him, something that made her feel both uneasy and captivated. "About you." His voice was steady, unyielding. "About who you really are." Ava frowned, feeling defensive. "I'm still figuring that out." He shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "No, you're not. You've been running from the truth for so long that you don't even know where to start." The word stung, and Ava's first instinct was to shut him out, to close off the conversation. But there was something in his eyes that made her want to listen. Something that pulled her in despite herself. "What do you know about me?" she demanded, trying to keep her composure. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room, his eyes scanning the luxury furniture, the extravagant decor. "I know you've spent your whole life pretending to be something you're not. You've built an image that everyone around you wants to see, but it's not you. It never has been." Ava felt a pang of guilt, but she quickly masked it with a sharp tone. "You don't know anything about me." He didn't flinch. "I know enough. And I know that the more you try to hide from who you really are, the more you'll lose yourself." The words hung in the air between them, like an accusation. Ava took a step back, suddenly overwhelmed. It wasn't just the challenge of playing music in front of a room full of strangers. It wasn't just the pressure of trying to prove herself, it was this feeling of being seen. Really seen. And that was terrifying. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, and sat down on the couch. His eyes never left hers, and Ava felt like he was peeling away the layers of her carefully constructed life, exposing the rawness underneath. "You've been running from something," he said quietly, his voice soft but insistent. "You think coming to Austin will make things better. You think playing music will fix everything. But you're wrong." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "You've been running from your past. Running from your family, from your father. And you've been using this perfect image to hide from the truth." The mention of her father sent a sharp jolt of panic through her. She had spent years trying to distance herself from him, from his constant pressure to succeed, to be the perfect daughter. Her father had always been the one to shape her world, demanding, critical, and controlling. Nothing she did was ever enough for him. Ava's chest tightened. "Stop." But the man didn't stop. His voice was steady, like he was trying to get through to her. "You can't outrun it forever. You can't outrun him." Ava turned away from him, her heart pounding. "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about him." He stood up and approached her, his tone gentle now. "I know it's hard. But avoiding it isn't the answer. You'll never be free until you face what's holding you back." Ava's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. "I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect for him. Trying to live up to his expectations. But no matter what I do, it's never enough. He doesn't love me for who I am. He only loves the idea of me. The perfect daughter who does everything right." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of the emotions she had been burying for years. Anger, sadness, frustration, all of it came rushing to the surface, and she couldn't stop it. The man stood there, silent, watching her struggle. When she finally looked up at him, there was a shift in her expression. The rawness of the truth, of her own pain, was finally starting to sink in. "You don't have to be perfect for him," he said softly. "You never did." The words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, Ava felt like she might collapse under the weight of them. But instead of falling apart, something inside her shifted. "So, what do I do now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He looked at her, his expression softening just slightly. "You face him. You face the truth of who you are, not who he wants you to be. And then you start living for yourself." Ava stood in the center of the room, the weight of his words hanging over her. The man had just given her something she hadn't had in years: permission. Permission to be herself. Permission to stop pretending. And as terrifying as it was, she knew he was right. She couldn't run anymore. The air in Austin felt different the next morning. The weight of last night's conversation hung in the air like a thick fog that refused to lift. Ava stood by the window of her hotel room, looking out at the city with a sense of unease. It had been hours since she'd spoken to the man, and his words still echoed in her mind, reverberating with an intensity she wasn't sure how to handle. She had come to Austin to escape, to find something real, but now she was faced with the very thing she had been running from: her past. Her father. And the suffocating weight of his expectations. "You'll never be free until you face what's holding you back." The man's voice was still fresh in her mind. She had spent her entire life under the shadow of her father, trying to fit into the mold he had created for her, trying to meet the impossible standards he had set. It was a cage she had built around herself, and the bars were made of fear, guilt, and a desperate need for approval. But now, she was starting to see the truth. She couldn't keep running. She couldn't keep pretending. Ava knew what she had to do. Later that day, she made the call. The one she had been dreading for years. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number, her fingers slick with sweat. She didn't know what to expect, whether he would answer, whether he would even care. But she knew one thing, she couldn't avoid him any longer. The phone rang twice before her father's cold, familiar voice greeted her on the other end. "Ava. I wasn't expecting to hear from you." His tone was sharp, businesslike, distant, as always. She had grown used to it over the years. It was the way he spoke to her when he didn't have time for her, when she was nothing more than a cog in the machine of his life. "I need to talk to you," Ava said, her voice steady but betraying the anxiety she felt inside. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ava could practically hear the wheels turning in her father's mind, wondering what this call could be about. "Go ahead," he said finally, his voice not quite as cold, but still full of that detachment that always made her feel like an afterthought. Ava took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm not the person you think I am." Her father's response was immediate, almost dismissive. "I don't have time for your games, Ava. I'm busy." Ava's heart pounded, but she pressed on. "This isn't a game. I'm done trying to live up to your expectations. I'm done trying to be the perfect daughter for you." There was another long silence on the other end, and Ava's stomach tightened with the fear of rejection, of hearing him dismiss her, yet again. "What are you talking about?" Her father's voice was colder now, more confused. "You know what's expected of you. You know what you have to do." Ava could hear the frustration in his voice, the impatience. It was always the same, always about the image, the reputation, the endless pursuit of perfection. But this time, she wasn't going to let him control her. "No," Ava said firmly. "I don't know anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. All I know is that I've been trying to be someone I'm not for far too long." Her voice broke slightly, but she held her ground. "I'm not your perfect daughter, and I'm not going to keep pretending to be. I'm done with it." For the first time in their entire relationship, Ava heard her father's voice falter. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone dropping a few degrees. "You'll regret this. You can't just walk away from everything I've built for you." Ava felt the sharp sting of his words, but it wasn't enough to make her back down. She had spent years living in the shadow of his success, letting his ambitions define her. But now, for the first time in her life, she was choosing herself. "I'm not walking away from everything. I'm walking toward who I am," she said, her voice growing stronger. "And I don't need your approval to do that." There was a brief pause, and for a moment, Ava thought he might say something to change her mind. But instead, his voice came through, colder than ever. "You'll regret this, Ava. You're throwing everything away." But Ava wasn't listening anymore. "Goodbye, Father." She hung up the phone, the weight of the decision sinking in. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of relief. The chains that had bound her for so long were beginning to loosen, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing: it was her road to walk now. Later that day, Ava found herself back in the tuning room, alone with the piano. The space was empty, save for the soft hum of the city in the distance. The walls that had once felt oppressive now seemed like an invitation. She sat at the piano, her fingers grazing the keys as she breathed deeply. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ava played without worrying about perfection. The music came from a different place within her, one that wasn't shaped by anyone else's expectations, but her own. Each note was a declaration, a statement of freedom. A symbol of her choice to step into her own truth. As the music filled the room, she felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The pressure to be someone she wasn't, to live up to an image that didn't belong to her, started to fade. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but she was finally starting to break free. As she finished playing, Ava looked up, her eyes meeting the reflection in the window. She didn't recognize the person she had been a week ago, and she wasn't sure who she would be tomorrow. But for the first time in her life, she was okay with that. She didn't need to have it all figured out. She just needed to be real. With her heart pounding in her chest, Ava knew she had made the hardest decision of her life. She had stood up to her father, broken free from the cage of expectations he had built around her, and embraced a path she hadn't even known existed until now. The road ahead would be difficult, but it would be hers to walk. And with that knowledge, Ava finally felt free. Ava's decision to walk away from her father's expectations had been both liberating and terrifying. The weight of the choice still pressed heavily on her chest, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was the right thing to do. Her life, up until that moment, had been a series of carefully constructed facades. A life curated for the public eye. But now, with one phone call, she had pulled down the walls that had kept her locked in a world that wasn't truly hers. It wasn't the absence of her father's expectations that was the hardest part, it was the fear of what would come next. What would she become if she wasn't his perfect daughter? Who would she be without his influence shaping every step of her existence? Ava wasn't sure, and the uncertainty made her pulse quicken. The next morning, as the sun cast its warm golden rays over Austin, Ava found herself standing in front of the large mirror in her hotel room. She looked at her reflection, taking in a face that had always been just one version of who she was. The perfect daughter. The heiress. The one who never made a mistake, who never strayed from the path that was laid out for her. But now, as she stared at herself, she saw someone else, a woman who was beginning to break free from the mold. A woman who didn't need to be perfect to be worthy. With a deep breath, Ava turned away from the mirror and grabbed her phone, staring at the screen for a long moment. She had already cut ties with her father, but there was still another person she needed to confront. Elon Musk. She hadn't expected her path to cross with his in any significant way. Yet, after that shocking performance in the tuning room, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was someone who had been more of a catalyst in her life than she had realized. His words, his actions, had a way of shaking her to her core. There was something disarming about him, something that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something huge. But there was more to this than just his piano performance. She hadn't been the only one trying to prove something that night. He had played with an intensity and raw emotion that she hadn't expected. There was a side to Elon Musk that no one seemed to see, a depth beyond his public persona as a billionaire tech mogul. Ava needed answers. She needed to understand what had been behind his unexpected performance. Why had he chosen that moment, that room, to reveal something so vulnerable? And, most importantly, what did it all mean for her? Ava's fingers hovered over her phone as she debated whether to call him. She hadn't spoken to him since the night of the performance, and there was no telling how he would react. But she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were entwined in a way neither of them had expected. Finally, she pressed the dial button. The phone rang twice before Elon's familiar voice came through, cool and collected, as always. Ava. There was a pause, as if he was assessing her tone. What's going on? His voice was steady, but there was an undertone of curiosity. She had no doubt that he was expecting her to continue avoiding the truth, just like everyone else in her life. But this was different. She wasn't going to hide anymore. I need to talk to you, Ava said, her voice a little more hesitant than she wanted it to be. He was silent for a moment, and she could practically hear the wheels turning in his mind. Then, without skipping a beat, he responded. About what? About us, she said, her pulse quickening. About that night. About why you did it. There was another pause, and Ava could feel the tension building in the air between them. She had no idea how he would react. Would he brush her off? Would he think she was just some rich girl trying to make sense of something she didn't understand? But instead of dismissing her, Elon's voice softened, though it still carried that sharpness she had come to expect. You're curious, aren't you? His words were not a question, but a statement. About why I played the piano. About why I revealed something that no one ever gets to see. Ava nodded to herself, even though he couldn't see her. Yeah. I guess I am. It felt like you were showing me something, something real. Something beyond the mask. Elon's laugh was low and knowing. I'm not the man everyone thinks I am, Ava. And I'm not here to prove anything to anyone, least of all you. Ava swallowed hard, her heart racing. Then why did you play? Why did you let me see that? There was a long pause. When Elon spoke again, his voice was quieter, more thoughtful. Because I saw something in you that I haven't seen in a long time. A person who isn't just playing a role, someone who's tired of the game. You and I, we're not so different, you know. Ava's mind spun. She had always thought of Elon Musk as a man who had it all figured out, someone who didn't need to reveal anything about himself. But now, hearing his words, she wasn't so sure. What do you mean? She asked, her voice softer now, more vulnerable than she intended. I mean, Elon said slowly, that I've been hiding behind my own mask for years. Just like you. We both put on a show for the world. We both try to be what everyone expects of us. Ava felt a surge of relief, realizing that she wasn't the only one grappling with the weight of expectations. In that moment, she saw a side of Elon that she hadn't expected. A side that wasn't invincible or untouchable, but human. And how do you stop? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do you stop pretending? Elon's response was quiet, but firm. You don't stop pretending all at once. You take it one step at a time. You find moments when you can be real, even if it's just for yourself. You let go of the things that don't matter, and you figure out who you really are. Ava let his words sink in, feeling a weight lift from her chest. Maybe she didn't have to have it all figured out right now. Maybe she just had to start with small steps, with finding moments of truth, like that piano performance. Maybe that was the beginning of breaking free from the mask that had shaped her for so long. Thank you, she said softly. For showing me that. Elon's voice softened, just a hint of warmth creeping through. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. As the call ended, Ava leaned back in her chair, a sense of clarity washing over her. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't the only one struggling to break free from the confines of a life built on false expectations. And with that thought, Ava knew that the reckoning was just beginning. The morning after her conversation with Elon Musk felt surreal. Ava had spent the entire night reflecting on everything they had discussed, letting his words settle into her mind like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking together. He was right, this wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. But something had shifted inside her. She felt different. More alive. More herself. She was no longer pretending to be the person her father wanted her to be, the person the world thought she was. Ava was starting to embrace her own identity, the one that had been buried beneath years of expectations and pressure. But this was only the beginning. The next step was confronting the people in her life who had shaped her destiny, whether she liked it or not. The first person she had to face, of course, was her mother. Ava had always been the golden child, the one her mother showered with love and admiration. But even though her mother had always tried to protect her from the harsh realities of the world, Ava knew that her mother's love came with conditions, expectations, just like her father's. And now, Ava was about to shatter them. She had been putting off the conversation for days, dreading the disappointment she would see in her mother's eyes. But she couldn't keep running from the truth. Not anymore. Ava took a deep breath before dialing her mother's number. The ringing tone felt louder than usual, almost mocking her, reminding her of the weight of the decision she had already made. But it didn't matter now. She had to face this. Her mother picked up on the third ring. Ava? Honey, how are you? Her voice was warm and soothing, just like it always had been. But there was a certain edge to it, a subtle hint that she could sense something was off. I'm good, Mom, Ava said, her voice betraying the nervousness that bubbled beneath the surface. Can we talk? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, a brief pause that felt like an eternity. Then her mother's voice softened. Of course, sweetie. What's going on? Ava clenched her fists, steeling herself for the storm she knew was coming. Mom. I'm not coming back to the family business. The words hit the air between them like a bomb, and Ava could practically hear the shock in her mother's voice. What? Ava, what do you mean? You're the future of this company. Your father has been counting on you. Her voice wavered with a mix of disbelief and fear. I can't do it anymore, Mom. Ava's voice shook with emotion as she spoke. I can't live my life for Dad. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. Her mother's silence was deafening. Ava knew that her mother had always wanted the best for her, but this was a betrayal. A deep one. The very foundation of their relationship had been built on the understanding that Ava would step into the role she had been groomed for. Now, she was breaking it all down. I don't understand, her mother finally said, her voice cold and distant. You've worked so hard for this, Ava. It's your destiny. You can't just walk away from it. Ava felt the sting of her words, but she couldn't back down. It's not my destiny, Mom. It's what you and Dad decided for me. It's never been what I wanted. I'm not happy. I can't keep living this life if it's not mine. Her mother's voice softened, but the hurt was still there. But Ava, you've worked so hard. You've sacrificed so much. Do you really think you can just throw it all away? Ava closed her eyes, imagining her mother's face on the other end of the line. She could picture the disappointment, the tears welling up in her mother's eyes. It broke her heart, but she knew she had to keep going. I have to, Mom. For myself. I have to find my own way. There was a long silence, and Ava's heart ached as she waited for her mother to respond. Finally, her mother's voice cracked, betraying the pain she was feeling. I don't know what to say, Ava. I don't know what's happened to you, but this isn't you. This is a mistake. Ava's stomach twisted with guilt, but she stood her ground. I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could be the person you want me to be, but I can't. I have to do this for me. Her mother didn't say anything for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her words were heavy with resignation. I hope you know what you're doing, Ava. I really do. Ava didn't know what to say in response. She wanted to tell her mother that she did know what she was doing, that she was finally finding herself. But the truth was, she didn't have all the answers. She just knew that she couldn't keep living the lie. I'm sorry, Mom, she said softly, feeling the tears welling up in her eyes. I love you. I love you too, her mother replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And then, with a final, heartbreaking pause, she hung up. Ava sat in silence, the weight of the conversation sinking in. Her chest ached, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had just broken something that could never be mended. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized that she had made the right decision. She had chosen herself. But as she sat there, staring at her phone, another thought crept into her mind. She had just spoken to her mother, the person she had always feared would be the most disappointed in her. But what about the others? What about the people who had been her friends, her colleagues, her world? Ava wasn't sure if she was ready to face them all just yet. But she knew that the moment was coming. She could only hope that, in time, they would understand why she had made this choice. But for now, the silence felt like freedom. The weight of expectation had been lifted, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty and unease. Ava had made her decision, and now, there was no turning back. She had broken free from the expectations of her parents, from the suffocating pressure of the family business. But in its place, she found herself standing on the edge of a vast, unfamiliar landscape. It was like staring out into the unknown, not knowing which direction to take or what path to follow. Despite the overwhelming freedom, there was a strange sense of disorientation that crept up on her in moments of silence. She had spent so many years living a life dictated by others, her father's ambitions, her mother's hopes, the world's perception of who she was, that she wasn't entirely sure who she was anymore. But in the midst of this confusion, one thing was clear: she was finally ready to carve her own path. She had the power to decide what came next, and that thought brought both excitement and fear in equal measure. It was a Saturday afternoon when Ava received a message that would change the course of her new life. It was from Elon Musk. "Let's talk. I think it's time you understand what happens next." The message was cryptic, yet somehow, it felt like an invitation to something bigger than she could have imagined. A chance to step into a world where she could redefine herself, far away from the polished image of the wealthy heiress. Ava didn't hesitate. She called him back immediately, her mind racing with questions. Why was he reaching out to her? Was this just about their brief, intense interaction at the tuning room, or was there something more to it? Elon picked up after the second ring. His voice was calm, as usual, but there was an edge to it that suggested he was about to reveal something important. "Ava," he said, his tone direct. "You're at a crossroads right now. And I think you're starting to understand that the world you've been living in is nothing more than a well-polished illusion." Ava swallowed hard. The way he spoke, it was as if he could see straight through her, past all the layers she had built to protect herself. She felt vulnerable, exposed, but at the same time, there was something strangely comforting about it. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to pretend. "I know," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm swirling in her mind. "I'm starting to see that. But I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go from here." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Elon spoke again. "That's exactly why you need to meet me. I think I can help you figure that out." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "Help me?" "Yes," Elon said, his voice almost playful, though there was a gravity to it. "But first, you need to come to Austin. I've got something important to show you. Something that might just change everything." Ava was taken aback. Austin? She hadn't expected that. But then again, she had learned by now that nothing about Elon Musk's world was predictable. It was unconventional, unpredictable, and exactly what she needed. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with a mix of determination and curiosity. "I'll come." The following morning, Ava found herself on a private jet heading to Austin. The reality of her new life was settling in, and with it came the realization that this wasn't just about breaking free from her past, it was about embracing a future that was entirely hers to shape. As the plane soared through the sky, she thought back to her conversation with her mother. Her heart still ached from that call, but she knew that it was a necessary step in her journey. She had been afraid of letting her mother down, but now she understood that her life wasn't meant to be lived to fulfill someone else's dreams. It was her own life, and it was time to live it on her own terms. But as she gazed out the window, a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. What if she had made a mistake? What if she was throwing everything away for a fleeting sense of freedom? She quickly pushed the thought aside. There was no turning back now. A few hours later, Ava arrived in Austin. The city was a stark contrast to the sleek, polished world she had left behind. The streets were alive with energy, a blend of old and new, of creativity and innovation. It felt like a place where anything was possible, a place where she could reinvent herself. Elon's assistant met her at the airport and drove her to a sleek, modern building on the outskirts of the city. The building was minimalist but exuded an aura of power and intelligence, much like the man himself. Ava was both nervous and excited as they walked inside, following the assistant down a long corridor until they reached a private, soundproof room at the back of the building. Inside the room, a grand piano sat in the center, surrounded by large windows that allowed the light to spill in, bathing the space in a warm glow. But it wasn't just the piano that caught her attention, it was the man standing next to it. Elon Musk, dressed casually but with an air of authority that he carried effortlessly, was staring at her with a gaze that seemed to pierce right through her. "Welcome to my world," he said with a small smile, motioning for her to sit down. Ava took a seat, her curiosity piqued. "This is your world?" she asked, glancing around the room. "Part of it," Elon replied. "This is where I come when I need to think. When I need to focus. It's where I escape the noise." Ava nodded, absorbing his words. She could understand that everyone needed an escape, a place to ground themselves. And in that moment, she realized that this was more than just a meeting. It was a chance for her to step into a new reality, to create something from scratch. "What is it you want to show me?" Ava asked, her voice full of anticipation. Elon smiled, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. "It's not about showing you anything, Ava. It's about helping you see it for yourself. The question is, are you ready to stop living in the shadows and start living in the light?" The question hung in the air between them, and Ava felt her heart race. This was it. The moment when everything she had been avoiding could finally come to light. She was standing on the edge of something monumental, and she could feel it deep in her bones. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, her heart full of determination. As Elon walked toward the piano and sat down, Ava knew this was more than just a meeting. This was the beginning of something new. Something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. And in that moment, she understood, the journey she was on was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ava took a deep breath as she watched Elon approach the grand piano, his fingers poised above the keys. The room was filled with an expectant silence, the kind that wraps itself around you, urging you to stay still, to pay attention. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake by coming here. What was she doing in a room with Elon Musk, of all people? He was brilliant, yes, but also enigmatic and unpredictable. And now, he was about to show her, what? The idea of being in the presence of someone like him made her heart race with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Elon didn't waste any time. His fingers pressed down on the keys, and the first notes of a song echoed through the room. It wasn't the kind of music Ava expected from someone like him, sharp, calculated, and analytical. Instead, it was raw. Emotional. As the sound filled the space, Ava felt something inside her stir. The music wasn't just notes, it was a language that spoke to parts of her she hadn't realized were there, waiting to be awakened. Elon's hands moved across the keys with ease, his focus intense as if he were channeling something much deeper than just a melody. The music was both haunting and beautiful, a stark contrast to the tech-savvy, hyperlogical persona he had built. As the song continued, Ava found herself drawn into it, her mind slipping away from the doubt and fear she had carried with her, replacing it with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in weeks. She couldn't help but watch him, fascinated by the way his hands seemed to move effortlessly, as if the piano had become an extension of himself. There was something almost otherworldly about the way he played, it was as though he wasn't just making music, but was becoming the music itself. When the final note reverberated through the room, the silence was profound. Elon's fingers hovered above the keys for a moment before he slowly withdrew his hands, his gaze meeting Ava's for the first time since he began. "How does it feel?" he asked, his voice low and contemplative. Ava blinked, still processing the experience. The music had taken her somewhere else, to a place of clarity she hadn't anticipated. It was as if the sound had washed over her, cleansing her mind of the noise that had been there for so long. "It's incredible," she said softly, not quite able to find the right words. "I didn't expect that." Elon smiled, a subtle curve of his lips, but there was a warmth to it that she hadn't expected. Music has a way of doing that. It taps into emotions and thoughts that are difficult to express with words alone. It's a language in its own right, one that transcends barriers. And it's powerful, Ava. Very powerful. Ava tilted her head, intrigued. "But how does this relate to all of this?" I mean, the work you're doing, the companies you've built, the way you've changed the world. Elon stood up and turned to face her, his eyes thoughtful. It's all connected. Everything I've done, everything I will do, comes down to the power of vision. And the power of vision is not just about seeing the world as it is, but seeing it as it could be. Music teaches you that, how to see beyond the surface, to feel things more deeply, to create something out of nothing. It's what drives innovation, it's what drives change. It's the same mindset that's at the heart of what we're doing at SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and beyond. It's about connecting the dots, thinking in ways most people don't, and making the impossible possible. Ava felt a chill run down her spine as his words settled into her. She had been raised to believe that success came through hard work, through following the rules, and through playing the game in a very specific way. But now, sitting in this room, with Elon speaking about vision and innovation in such an intimate way, it was clear that there was something far more profound at play here. It was about creativity. It was about thinking differently. It was about breaking boundaries. But she still couldn't help but feel a sense of disconnect. I get what you're saying, she said slowly, but I don't think I can do what you do. I don't have that kind of genius. I'm not like you, Elon. I don't think like you. Elon raised an eyebrow, almost amused. You don't need to be like me. You just need to be you. The fact that you're sitting here today means you're already on the right path. You've already taken the first step, challenging the expectations that others have placed on you. Now, it's time to take that momentum and channel it into something that's uniquely yours. It's not about doing what I do. It's about doing what only you can do. Ava felt a flicker of something stir deep within her, a seed of possibility that had been planted during their conversation. She was used to following the path laid out for her, to doing what others expected of her. But in this moment, she realized that the path she had been on wasn't hers at all. It was a path that had been constructed by other people's dreams, their ideals, their limitations. She wasn't sure what her own path looked like yet, but sitting in this room with Elon Musk, listening to him speak about vision and creativity, something inside her began to shift. The weight of the expectations that had been placed on her shoulders started to feel lighter, like a burden she was slowly releasing. I don't know where to begin, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to even start thinking about what I want. I've spent so long trying to be what others wanted me to be. Elon's expression softened, and for the first time, Ava saw a different side to him, one that wasn't just about innovation or tech, but about something much more human. The first step is simple, Ava, he said, his tone gentle but firm. Stop thinking about what you should do, and start thinking about what you could do. The possibilities are endless. Don't limit yourself. Ava nodded slowly, letting the weight of his words settle in. She wasn't sure how she was going to figure it out, but she realized something important: she didn't have to have all the answers right now. The future wasn't something she needed to have mapped out, not yet. What mattered was starting the journey. As the sound of the piano still lingered in the air, Ava made a promise to herself. She was going to find her own voice. She was going to create something that was uniquely hers, something that was as authentic as the music she had just heard. And even though she didn't know what that looked like yet, she was ready to take the first step. The door to the future was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, Ava was excited to walk through it. The next few days were a whirlwind of new experiences for Ava. Everything felt unfamiliar, yet exhilarating. She had arrived in Austin with nothing but questions, and now, she found herself surrounded by possibilities she had never imagined. Elon had introduced her to a side of life she hadn't even known existed, one where creativity, innovation, and possibility were the cornerstones of existence. She had spent the first few days after their meeting in the studio, soaking in every word Elon had shared with her. His philosophy on life, his view of the future, his refusal to accept the status quo, it was all so radical, so different from everything she had known. But it resonated with her in a way she couldn't ignore. Ava had always been the picture of restraint and control, the heir to a family empire, molded into a certain shape by years of conditioning. But as she stood on the edge of this new life, she realized that she had been living in the shadows for too long. Now, it was time to step into the light. However, the road ahead was not without its challenges. Elon had set up a few meetings for her with influential figures in the startup world, innovators who were changing the game in ways she could never have anticipated. But each meeting left her feeling both inspired and overwhelmed. She wasn't sure if she could keep up. These were people who had dedicated their lives to creating something new, to solving problems that seemed insurmountable. Ava, on the other hand, felt like a fish out of water. One particular meeting stood out. She had met with a tech entrepreneur who was known for revolutionizing renewable energy. He was brash, unapologetically ambitious, and driven by a single purpose: to save the planet. He had spoken passionately about his projects, about how they were going to change the world, and Ava found herself captivated by his energy and enthusiasm. Yet, as the meeting went on, she felt a growing sense of insecurity. She wasn't sure what her place was in all of this. What could she possibly bring to the table? She was not a tech genius, not an inventor. She wasn't even sure what her passion was. She had been so wrapped up in fulfilling other people's expectations that she had forgotten what it was like to do something for herself. To have something that was hers. Later that evening, Ava found herself sitting in her hotel room, staring out the window at the twinkling lights of the city. She felt the weight of the decisions she had made pressing down on her. She had left her family, her legacy, her old life behind, but now that she was free, she wasn't sure what to do with that freedom. She was adrift, trying to find something to hold on to in a sea of uncertainty. It was then that her phone buzzed. It was a text from Elon. "Come to the studio tomorrow. I have something I want to show you. Let's talk." Ava stared at the message for a moment, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension swirling in her gut. She had been questioning everything since she arrived in Austin, but somehow, she trusted Elon. He had been the first person to make her feel like she didn't have to be anything other than who she was, no pretense, no expectations. Maybe this was the moment she needed to refocus, to get a clearer sense of what she was supposed to do next. The following morning, she arrived at the studio early, as she had done for the past few days. The moment she stepped inside, Elon was already there, seated at the piano, staring out the window. He didn't look up when she entered, but she could feel his presence in the room, like a gravitational pull. She took a seat on the couch and waited. The silence between them felt familiar, comfortable in its own way. Finally, Elon spoke, his voice calm but with a subtle undercurrent of urgency. "I know you're struggling with this, Ava," he began. "I can see it in your eyes. You've been thrown into a world that's unlike anything you've ever known. And it's overwhelming, isn't it?" Ava nodded, surprised by how easily he had seen through her. It was almost as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what to do. I've always been the one who followed the rules, who did what was expected of me. But now that I have this freedom, I don't even know where to begin." Elon was silent for a moment, his fingers resting lightly on the keys of the piano. Then, without warning, he began to play. The music wasn't like the previous piece he had played for her. This was different. It was intense, raw, filled with an emotion that felt like it had been simmering just beneath the surface for a long time. As the music swirled around her, Ava closed her eyes, letting herself be consumed by it. The melody seemed to speak to her in ways words could not, a language of emotion and intuition. It felt like the music was reaching into her very soul, coaxing something out of her that she had buried deep down. When the song ended, Elon turned to her with a steady gaze. "You know what that was?" he asked. Ava opened her eyes, still entranced by the intensity of the music. It was beautiful. But also painful. Elon nodded, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "Exactly. That's how life is, Ava. It's not always beautiful, and it's not always easy. There are going to be moments of doubt, moments when you feel like you're not enough. But that's part of the process. The pain, the uncertainty, it's what shapes us. It's what drives us to grow. It's the turning point. Ava's heart raced as she processed his words. She had always viewed pain and uncertainty as obstacles to be avoided, but here, Elon was telling her that they were not only inevitable, they were necessary. She had to face them if she was ever going to move forward. The turning point, she whispered to herself, as if the words themselves held the key to everything. Elon smiled faintly. Yes. The turning point. But it's up to you, Ava. You can either let this moment pass, or you can use it to propel yourself forward. You can't stay stuck in the past. You have to decide who you want to be and what you want to create. And once you make that decision, everything will start to fall into place. Ava stood up, her mind whirling. It was as if something inside her had shifted, like a switch had been flipped. The weight she had been carrying for so long, of expectation, of fear, of uncertainty, seemed to lift, just a little. For the first time in a long time, she felt the stirrings of something that resembled hope. As she walked out of the studio that day, something within her had changed. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she no longer needed them. The future was open, and she was ready to step into it. Ava awoke the next morning to a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. The fog of uncertainty had begun to lift, replaced by a strange but undeniable certainty that something was changing within her. The turning point Elon had spoken about. It wasn't just a passing moment, it was a new way of seeing the world. She was no longer tethered to the expectations of her family or the life they had carved out for her. She was free. But freedom came with its own set of challenges. She spent the next few days sorting through the ideas Elon had presented to her, the ways she could tap into her creativity, her potential, to create something meaningful. But each time she sat down to plan, she found herself at a crossroads. There were so many directions she could go. Should she venture into technology like Elon? Or perhaps something more artistic, like the music that had opened her eyes to new possibilities? One thing became clear, the more she thought about it, the more it felt like she was staring at an endless ocean, with no clear path to follow. It was both liberating and terrifying. It wasn't until she met with a local entrepreneur, Maya, that she began to see a clearer picture. Maya had been a musician in her early life, but had pivoted into the world of sustainable design. She had built a startup from the ground up, one that focused on creating environmentally conscious living spaces. Her approach was holistic, blending art, architecture, and sustainability into a new way of thinking about the future. Ava was immediately captivated by Maya's energy and vision. Maya had a calm confidence about her that Ava couldn't ignore. She spoke about the importance of finding one's own voice and not being afraid to step into the unknown. Maya's journey had not been easy, but she had learned that it was the challenges, the failures, that had shaped her into the woman she was today. You can't be afraid of uncharted waters, Maya had told her during their meeting. That's where the magic happens. It's when you're forced to navigate the unknown that you discover who you really are. Those words resonated with Ava deeply. She realized that Maya wasn't just talking about business. She was talking about life itself. Ava had spent so much of her existence avoiding the unknown, preferring the safe, predictable path. But now, standing in the middle of this new world, she understood that the unknown wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. But that didn't make the path ahead any less daunting. The very next day, Ava made her way to the studio to meet Elon again. As she entered, she found him hunched over a blueprint, his face lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He looked up when she entered, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I've been waiting for you," he said, standing up. "I thought we should talk about your next steps." Ava nodded, her heart racing slightly. She had been grappling with the idea of what to do next, and now, it seemed that the moment to make a decision had arrived. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she began, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I know I want to create something that matters, but I'm still not sure what that looks like. Elon leaned against the desk, his eyes thoughtful. That's completely normal. The hardest part is figuring out where to start. But here's what I know, if you keep waiting for the perfect idea, the perfect moment, you'll never move. The key is to start somewhere, anywhere, and build from there. Ava took in his words. It wasn't about waiting for everything to fall into place. It was about making a decision and acting on it, even if it meant taking a leap into the unknown. What if I make the wrong choice? She asked, her voice tinged with doubt. What if I fail? Elon smiled, a slight twinkle in his eye. Failure is just a part of the process. If you're not failing, you're not learning. It's what makes the journey worth it. There's no such thing as the perfect path. The only thing that matters is that you're moving forward. Ava sat back, absorbing his words. She knew he was right, but the thought of stepping into the unknown still felt overwhelming. She had always been in control of her life, always followed a clear, mapped-out course. But now, everything was uncertain. She didn't know where the road would lead, and that terrified her. So, what's the first step? Ava asked, her voice soft but steady. Elon paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel like he was reading her very soul. The first step is to trust yourself, he said. It's time to stop looking for the right answer and start trusting your instincts. You already have the ability to create something incredible. You just need to believe in it. Ava looked at him, feeling a spark of something inside her, hope, maybe, or maybe just the desire to believe. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was starting to find the right questions. The following weeks were a blur of activity. Ava immersed herself in new projects, meeting with potential partners, collaborating with other creatives, and slowly, she began to build something she was proud of. The process wasn't always smooth, there were moments of doubt, moments when she wanted to throw in the towel and return to the safety of her old life. But every time she felt that pull, she reminded herself of the promise she had made, to stop looking for the perfect path and to start creating her own. The more she leaned into the unknown, the more she realized that it was where she had to be. It was where she could grow. And with every step, the unknown didn't seem so intimidating anymore, it felt like home. Ava had stepped into uncharted waters, and for the first time, she was swimming with confidence. Ava sat in the corner of the studio, her fingers drumming lightly against the smooth surface of a wooden table. The world outside seemed distant, muffled by the walls of her own thoughts. She had been working tirelessly over the past few weeks, piecing together a business idea that she could genuinely call her own. Each day felt like a new challenge, but it was one she was eager to face. The project she had started, something that merged the world of sustainability, technology, and artistic expression, was taking shape, though it wasn't easy. There were moments when she felt like she was pushing against a wall, but there were also moments of exhilaration when the pieces seemed to fit together perfectly. Her vision was clearer now, but the road was still long. And with every new step she took, she realized how far she had come from the world she had left behind, the world of privilege and expectations, where every move she made was scrutinized and controlled. Here, in this new world, she was the one making the rules. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But even in the midst of these changes, there was still one thing that unsettled her. The shadow of her family loomed over her every decision. Her parents had been less than thrilled when they found out she was stepping away from the family business to pursue something entirely new. They didn't understand it, didn't understand why she was willing to throw away the future they had built for her. Her father's disapproval still stung, and every time she spoke to him, she could feel the weight of his disappointment. He had always expected her to follow the path he had set, to continue the legacy of their family's fortune. It had never been an option to question it. But now, Ava wasn't sure what her legacy would be. She had spent so much of her life living in the shadow of that legacy that she had forgotten to ask herself what her legacy would be. What did she truly want to leave behind? The question gnawed at her as she worked, distracting her from the project in front of her. She glanced over at her phone, where the latest message from her father sat. She had been avoiding responding to it for days. The message was short and to the point, as usual. "Ava, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Come home." Her fingers hovered over the screen, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. She knew what he would say, what he always said, that she needed to come back to her senses, that she had thrown away everything they had worked for. She could almost hear his voice in her head, the stern tone that always made her feel small. But that voice, once so powerful, didn't seem as loud anymore. "Maybe it's time to let go of the past," she muttered to herself, more out of frustration than any real sense of conviction. Still, the doubt lingered, like a cloud on the horizon. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Elon entered, a slight grin on his face, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look deep in thought," he said, setting the cups down on the table. He sat across from her, his eyes searching hers with a curiosity she had come to recognize. Ava sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm just stuck." She looked at him, her voice quieter than usual. "I keep wondering if I'm making the right choices. There's so much at stake, and I'm not sure I can handle it." Elon raised an eyebrow but didn't speak right away. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee, considering her words. Finally, he leaned forward, his expression serious. "Do you think you're doing this for them?" he asked, referring to her family. "Are you doing this because you feel guilty? Because you're worried about disappointing them?" Ava's throat tightened at the question, but she nodded, even though she didn't want to admit it. "It's hard not to worry. They've built so much for me, and I'm just walking away from all of it. I don't know if I can keep going without their approval." Elon studied her for a moment, his eyes steady and unflinching. "Ava, you're not here for their approval. You're not here to continue a legacy that was never yours to begin with. You're here to create something that is yours. The fact that you're questioning this, doubting yourself, that means you're on the right path. It's when you stop questioning that you should be worried." Ava leaned back in her chair, his words sinking in slowly. "But what if I fail? What if I can't make it work? What if I fall flat on my face?" Elon smiled softly. "Then you get back up. You try again. You figure out what went wrong and you adjust. Failure is the ultimate teacher, you know." Ava let out a small laugh, but it was laced with nervousness. "I suppose I don't have a choice but to learn how to fail then." Elon shrugged, looking as though failure were something he had long since made peace with. "We all have to. You're not going to change the world if you're afraid of failing. And you're not going to create anything worth creating if you're only focused on doing it perfectly." Her thoughts were interrupted by a ping from her phone. Ava glanced at it, then back at Elon, her expression unreadable. "It's my dad again," she said, swiping away the message before Elon could see. "What does he want?" Elon asked, sensing the tension in her posture. Ava hesitated before answering, feeling the weight of the truth settling on her chest. "He wants me to come back. He thinks I'm throwing my life away. But every time I hear his voice, I wonder if he's right." Elon looked at her with a mixture of understanding and determination. "Ava, your life is yours to live. If you're going to build something, it has to be built from the inside out, not from anyone else's expectations. You can't let anyone else define your path. Only you can do that." She nodded slowly, her fingers once again tapping against the table, this time with more purpose. Ava didn't have all the answers. She didn't even have a full blueprint for what came next. But for the first time, she felt like she had a vision. A small spark of something powerful was igniting inside her. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing it for herself. And that, she realized, was more than enough. That evening, after a long day of work, Ava found herself standing on the balcony of her studio apartment, staring out at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a possibility, a choice she could make. And for the first time in a long time, Ava felt ready to choose. It was time to stop living in the shadow of other people's expectations. It was time to start living for herself. A new beginning was just on the horizon. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Ava stood by the window of her apartment, watching rain streak down the glass like nature's own tears, heavy and relentless. Thunder cracked in the distance, low and echoing, like the growl of something ancient waking up. It felt metaphorical, like the calm she had been clinging to was giving way to the chaos she'd been avoiding. Because chaos had arrived. Earlier that day, an article had gone viral on a major business blog. The headline was brutal. Heiress turns her back on billion-dollar empire for soul-searching startup. Is this ambition or rebellion? It was everywhere, Twitter, LinkedIn, even Instagram Reels. The tone was condescending, and the comments were even worse. Ava's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Some called her brave, others called her entitled. A few even called her delusional. But the worst part? Her father had given an interview. He didn't name her directly, but his words left no room for interpretation. Some people lose themselves in the illusion of independence. It's easy to walk away from responsibility when you've never had to earn your place to begin with. It was a shot fired. Publicly. And Ava felt every word hit like a cold slap to the face. Elon had texted her almost immediately after the article dropped. Ignore the noise. This is the part where most people give up. You don't have to. But it wasn't that easy. Ava had expected resistance. Maybe even a few headlines. But this was bigger than she imagined. She was being framed as a spoiled rebel with no direction. And worse, she feared people were starting to believe it, including herself. The next day, she walked into the studio with her shoulders a little lower, her usual confidence dulled. Elon noticed instantly. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her quietly from behind his piano, waiting for her to speak. I didn't expect it to get this ugly, she finally muttered. Elon nodded slowly. When you challenge the narrative people have about you, they'll fight to protect it. Even if that narrative was never yours to begin with. Ava rubbed her temples, feeling the beginnings of a migraine creeping in. My father basically said I'm lost. That I don't know what I'm doing. Elon shrugged. Maybe you are. But so what? Everyone's lost at some point. The difference is you're doing something about it. You're building. You're trying. He can't see that yet, but that doesn't make it any less true. She sank into the leather chair across from him, staring at the floor. It's hard to keep going when it feels like the world's laughing at you. Then let them laugh, Elon said simply. They laughed at electric cars too. They laughed when I said we'd land rockets and reuse them. Let them laugh. Just keep building. It was such a simple answer, but it didn't make the ache in her chest any easier to bear. Later that afternoon, Ava received an unexpected visit from someone she hadn't seen since she left LA, her older brother, Chase. He walked into the studio like he owned the place, dressed in a tailored jacket and designer boots, the kind of casual power move their father had perfected. You've made quite the mess, he said, no greeting, no warmth. Ava tensed immediately. You're not here to support me, are you? Chase scoffed. Support you? I'm here because Dad's furious. He thinks you've embarrassed the family. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? Ava stood her ground, but her voice shook. It's not about appearances anymore. It's about doing something that matters to me. Chase rolled his eyes. Oh, please. You walked away from a billion-dollar future to make mood boards and hang out with Elon Musk? Elon, who had been standing quietly behind the piano, finally spoke. She walked away from a future she didn't choose. That takes guts. Most people never even try. Chase turned to Elon, his face unreadable. Right. And I'm sure you had nothing to do with her epiphany, huh? Elon met his gaze calmly. I just played piano. She made her own choices. Chase turned back to Ava, the disappointment in his expression cutting deeper than any headline. You think you're finding yourself, he said. But from where I'm standing, you're just running away. Then he left. The room was silent after that. Ava didn't cry, she had done enough of that in private. But the words hit her harder than she expected. For a long time, she had looked up to Chase. He was strong, focused, unshakable. But now, he felt like another voice in the chorus of critics telling her she wasn't enough. But then she remembered what Elon had said, let them laugh. Just keep building. She stood up slowly and walked over to the whiteboard where they had started sketching her startup idea, a platform connecting eco-conscious creatives to sustainable resources and grants. It was still rough, still in its infancy, but it was hers. She grabbed a marker and started writing. Features. Partners. Goals. Her hand moved faster the more she let the vision pour out of her. Elon watched from the sidelines with a quiet nod. That's it, he said. This is what they don't see. They think it's all falling apart. But really? You're just getting started. That night, she went home and finally responded to her father's message. I'm not coming back. Not because I don't care about the family, but because I finally care about myself. And this is where I need to be. She hit send before she could second guess it. Outside, the storm had passed. The streets were still wet, the world still messy. But the sky had cleared just enough to see the stars again. The mic trembled slightly in Ava's hand. She stood at the edge of the stage, just off camera, waiting for her cue. The small auditorium smelled of fresh paint and stage lights, one of those startup incubator spaces in downtown Austin. It wasn't Carnegie Hall, but to Ava, it felt just as monumental. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't a pitch to investors. It was something much more vulnerable. A talk. Her talk. She was about to share her story, raw and unscripted, to a packed room of young founders, thinkers, artists, and an online audience that could number in the hundreds of thousands. It was the kind of stage her old self would have dismissed as beneath her, or maybe just never imagined needing. Now, it was everything. From backstage, Elon gave her a simple nod. His presence had become a quiet constant, offering ideas when needed, stepping back when it mattered more for her to lead. He'd coached her through the week, helping her organize thoughts, ground her ideas. But he refused to write the speech for her. Use your voice, he told her. Not mine. She swallowed hard, took a breath, and stepped out under the lights. The crowd quieted instantly. For a beat, Ava just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Then she leaned into the mic and said, "What happens when the life you were given doesn't feel like yours anymore?" That one sentence changed everything. She saw eyes widen in the front row. A few nods. A girl in the second row sat up straighter, intrigued. Ava smiled softly. "I grew up in a mansion. Private jets, designer clothes, charity galas at 15. I was supposed to take over $1 billion company by 30. That was the plan." She paused. But no one asked if it was my plan. The room was silent, hungry. A few months ago, I walked away from all of it. Not because I hated it. Not because I wanted to rebel. But because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear my own thoughts. I was living someone else's dream. The words didn't shake anymore. She was speaking from a place deeper than memory, from truth. Everyone around me thought I was crazy. Some still do. But here's the thing about losing everything you thought mattered, it forces you to find what actually does. From the wings, Elon leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes had that familiar spark, the look he got when something disruptive was about to happen. Ava continued. I didn't know who I was without the money, the family name, the privileges. But I started asking real questions. What makes me feel alive? What kind of world do I want to help build? And how can I do it my way? She gestured to the whiteboard behind her, where she'd drawn out the early framework for her project, EcoMuse, a digital incubator for creatives who wanted to change the world through sustainable art, fashion, and design. It was bold. Niche. Ambitious. It was hers. I'm not here to say I figured it all out. I haven't. But I'm here to say, if you feel like you don't belong in the life you're living, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to start over. And it's okay to be scared. I'm still scared. But I'm also free. A pause. And that's worth everything I left behind. The room erupted in applause. Not polite claps, real applause. Emotional. Honest. And for the first time since the storm hit, Ava didn't feel like she was faking it. She didn't feel like a rich girl trying to prove something. She felt seen. Heard. Real. Afterward, she stepped off stage and was immediately swarmed by young creators, students, and founders. That speech changed how I see everything, one girl told her, holding back tears. I thought I was crazy for walking away from law school. But hearing you, I know I'm not alone. Your project, EcoMuse, a young designer chimed in. It's exactly what I've been looking for. Where do I sign up? It was overwhelming, in the best way. Ava was still processing it all when Elon appeared at her side, a bottle of water in one hand. That, he said, wasn't a pitch. That was a revolution. She laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You moved people, Elon said simply. You showed them what it means to wake up. They sat on a bench outside afterward, under the stars. The air was cooler now. Softer. Do you think my dad saw it? Ava asked quietly. Elon was silent for a moment. Maybe. Maybe not. But that doesn't matter anymore, does it? She looked out over the city. No, it didn't. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving herself right. For the first time, Ava wasn't a story being told by someone else. She was the storyteller. She had found her voice, and she wasn't giving it back. Ava hadn't slept. The video of her talk had gone viral overnight. Views were climbing by the hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in from around the world, founders, artists, climate activists, even burned-out execs, all sharing how her words hit a nerve they hadn't been able to name before. She wasn't just trending. She was resonating. At 7:42 a.m., her inbox exploded. Among the dozens of PR requests and podcast invites was one email that stood out, not because of the sender, but because of the subject line. Let's build something bigger. It was from Dorian West, a name Ava hadn't heard in years but could never forget. Former Silicon Valley prodigy. VC mogul. Ruthlessly brilliant. Rumored to have funded half of the early green tech revolution, and squashed the other half. She clicked the email. Ava. Saw your talk. You've got fire, and a vision that's long overdue. Let's take EcoMuse global. I can fund the platform, the tech, the reach. Full-scale launch within 6 months. Series A starts at $50 million. Let's talk terms. Dorian. Ava stared at the message, her heart pounding. $50 million. It was the kind of backing startups dreamed of. It would catapult EcoMuse from an idea on a whiteboard to a movement with teeth. Offices. Teams. Resources. International reach. But it wasn't the money that made her hesitate. It was Dorian. She knew his reputation. He'd built empires, sure, but at a cost. Every founder who partnered with him came out the other side changed. Some were stronger. Most weren't. He was known for rewriting visions to fit his model. For gutting the soul out of projects in favor of scalability. Still, 50 million wasn't just tempting. It was a shortcut. A cheat code. And for a flicker of a moment, she imagined what that kind of power could do. She called Elon. He answered on the second ring. You saw it, didn't you? Yeah, she breathed. I saw it. There was a pause on the line. What are you thinking? Ava walked to the window, watching the city below come alive in morning light. It's everything we said we wanted. A chance to actually build something that matters. And fast. Elon's voice was careful. And what does Dorian get in return? He hasn't said. He doesn't have to. You already know. Ava swallowed. Control. Elon didn't respond for a moment, then finally said, only you can decide if that's a price worth paying. That afternoon, Ava met Dorian at a high-rise rooftop bar overlooking downtown. He looked exactly like she remembered, sharp suit, sharper smile, always 10 steps ahead. Ava, he said, rising to shake her hand. I've been waiting for someone like you. She gave a cautious smile. And I've been avoiding someone like you. He laughed, genuinely amused. Fair. But let's not pretend we don't both want the same thing, impact. Reach. A legacy. They ordered drinks. He didn't waste time. EcoMuse has teeth. You've got the fire. What you don't have, yet, is infrastructure. Developers. Global logistics. Manufacturing partners. I can get you all of that. Fast. And in return. He leaned back, fingers steepled. A controlling stake. 51%. Just enough to keep the ship pointed in the right direction. Your direction. The direction that gets it to scale. Ava, passion is a spark. But it takes fuel to build a fire that lasts. She stared at him, a slow knot twisting in her stomach. What happens when we disagree on vision? We don't, he said smoothly. Because you'll see I'm right. Eventually. There it was. The offer was real. The opportunity was massive. But so was the risk. Not just of failure, but of losing the heart of what she'd fought to create. Of watching EcoMuse become another polished, soulless machine pushing profit over purpose. And for the first time, Ava realized the real challenge wasn't the building. It was protecting what she built. That evening, she returned to the studio, exhausted but wired. Elon was there, of course, messing with an old analog synth that buzzed like a beehive. She didn't even wait for him to ask. He offered 51%. Elon stopped what he was doing. Slowly turned. Of course he did. He says he can take EcoMuse global. 6 months. Full launch. He can. But it won't be EcoMuse anymore. It'll be his. Ava dropped onto the couch, rubbing her temples. What if I can't do it without him? What if this whole thing only works with someone like Dorian backing it? Elon sat beside her. Quiet. Then. I had the same choice once. With Tesla. With SpaceX. People like him came around. Offering shortcuts. Fast tracks. Control. And I almost took it. She looked up at him. Why didn't you? Elon's eyes narrowed, like he was remembering a version of himself long buried. Because I didn't want to wake up one day and realize I built something brilliant that I didn't even recognize anymore. Ava nodded slowly. The choice wasn't about ambition. It was about integrity. Identity. I don't want to build someone else's vision, she said at last. Then don't, Elon replied. You don't need 50 million. You just need the right 20 people who believe in it as much as you do. Start there. The rest will come. That night, she wrote Dorian back. Dorian. Your offer is generous, and tempting. But I didn't walk away from a life of control just to hand it over again under a different name. EcoMuse will grow. But it'll grow on its own terms. Thanks, but no thanks. Ava. She hit send. She didn't regret it. Because for the first time, Ava wasn't just making decisions. She was defending them. And that, she realized, was the real difference between building a business and building a future. 3 weeks after Ava turned down Dorian's offer, the cracks started to show. It began with her lead developer pulling out. I love the vision, he had said, eyes darting sideways. But I've got student loans and a baby on the way. I can't work for equity anymore. Then came the server crash. Their prototype, EcoMuse Beta Hub for Artist Applications, went down during a key demo. It wasn't malicious. It was just, underfunded. Unstable. The third hit landed harder. Their first major partnership, a well-known sustainable fashion brand, emailed Ava with a change of direction. Corporate speak for, we don't believe you can pull this off anymore. Ava read the email in silence, then placed her phone face down on the desk. She didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. By the end of that week, Ava was skipping meetings, missing texts, and ignoring Elon's knocks on her studio door. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Of convincing people she wasn't just playing CEO dress-up. Of pitching passion like it was a business model. Tired of trying to matter in a world that measured worth in funding rounds and press releases. And for the first time since walking away from her old life, she wondered if she'd made a massive mistake. On a cold Tuesday night, Ava found herself walking alone through downtown Austin, hoodie pulled up, headphones in, city lights blurring as her mind spun. She ducked into an old diner, one of those 24-hour joints that still serve pie and played Motown on loop. She slid into a booth in the back, ordered black coffee, and sat staring at the scratched-up table. Her phone buzzed. Again. Elon. She let it ring. Then it buzzed again, this time, a text. I've been where you are. Don't disappear. Come play piano. Ava stared at the message for a long time. Come play piano. Not come talk. Not come solve problems. Just, play. It was ridiculous. And exactly what she needed. 30 minutes later, she walked into the studio, hood still up, heart still heavy. Elon was already there. Not saying a word. Just playing. Low notes, soft and steady. A quiet melody that wasn't flashy or perfect, it just felt like something. Like walking barefoot through a storm. Like showing up even when everything felt broken. Ava didn't say anything. She sat beside him on the bench. He nodded, shifted over, and let her hands join his. The two of them played without a word. No cameras. No agenda. Just music. Just pain turned into movement. And something inside her cracked open, not in a breaking way, but in the way ice thaws when winter finally gives in. Tears slipped down her face, silent and unannounced. Still, they played. Afterward, they sat on the floor, backs against the piano, legs stretched out. You're not wrong to feel like quitting, Elon said, voice low. You're building something that hasn't existed before. That's always ugly in the middle. Ava nodded, eyes puffy. But what if I'm not enough to finish it? He turned his head slightly toward her. You don't finish it alone. You build the fire. Then others bring wood. She let out a half laugh, half sob. That's the weirdest metaphor you've used yet. It's true though. He gave her a small smile. This thing isn't about being perfect. It's about being relentless. The next morning, Ava showed up to the studio at 7 a.m., before anyone else. She brought donuts, brewed coffee, and waited. By 9 a.m., her team trickled in, tired, skeptical, and unsure what kind of Ava they were getting today. What they got was different. Not the polished heiress. Not the burned-out rebel. They got a leader. Ava stood at the front of the room and told the truth. We're not going to scale overnight. We're going to get rejected. A lot. But if you're here for something bigger than funding or job titles, if you're here to build something that matters, then I'm still in. She paused, voice steady but honest. And if you're not? That's okay. But I need people in this room who are all in. Even when it sucks. Especially when it sucks. No one said anything for a long time. Then the designer who had almost quit last week stood up. I'm still in. One by one, others followed. That afternoon, they rebuilt the prototype from scratch. They lost a few more partnerships. But they also gained 3 new collaborators, artists who had seen Ava's talk and emailed directly. No pitch deck. No PR team. Just belief. Elon stopped by around dusk, watching from the doorway as the studio buzzed with tired but electric energy. Told you, he said quietly. Ava turned to him, a faint smile forming. Yeah. Fire. Wood. Relentless. Exactly. That night, Ava opened her journal for the first time in months. She wrote 5 words. This hurts. But I'm staying. She underlined it twice. Because this was the breaking point. And she hadn't broken. She just bent. And maybe, just maybe, become unshakable. The second launch of EcoMuse didn't happen with fireworks or fancy press events. It happened with a tweet. Simple, unpolished, and entirely Ava. We're back. For the artists. For the planet. For everyone told they're too small to matter. #EcoMuse. She hit send at 6:03 a.m. By 6:15, it had over 10,000 likes. By noon, Fast Company picked it up. By midnight, everything changed. EcoMuse 2.0 was far from perfect, but it was real. The new site was minimal, fast, and open to submissions from creatives across the globe. Filmmakers in Brazil. Jewelry designers in Kenya. Photographers in Detroit. All pitching sustainable projects that deserved a spotlight. The first day brought in 2,300 applications. The second day, over 7,000. By the end of the week, Ava had to temporarily close submissions to keep up. For the first time since walking away from her family's empire, Ava felt the tide turning for her, not against. Journalists were calling. Brands wanted to collaborate. A documentary crew reached out to follow the growth of EcoMuse. She was finally building something that could last. But the world watching came with a cost. It started with a podcast appearance. Ava had agreed to an interview with a well-known entrepreneur host who pitched it as a conversation about vision and resilience. Sounded perfect. But halfway through the live taping, the tone changed. Host, you talk about being self-made now. But how does that reconcile with growing up with a $14 million trust fund? Ava blinked. I don't call myself self-made. I walked away from privilege, I didn't erase it. Host, smiling like a shark, so you still have access to your inheritance? Ava, no. I gave up financial access when I walked out. Host, but that's not exactly the same as growing up on food stamps, is it? The clip went viral within hours. The internet did what it does best, judged without context. Rich girl pretending to be an underdog. She left the palace and wants a medal for walking through the village. Privilege cosplay. It hurt. Not because they were completely wrong, but because Ava had never tried to hide where she came from. She just wasn't there anymore. And she was doing the damn work. She sat in her studio that night with Elon, re-watching the clip in silence. When it ended, he leaned forward. Want to disappear for a few days? Can I afford to? Can you afford not to? The next day, they drove west. No security. No assistance. Just Elon's beat-up old Tesla Roadster and a backpack each. They hit the road in the early morning, headed toward Marfa, a strange, beautiful desert town in Texas known for its minimalist art and endless skies. Ava watched the landscape flatten out as they drove in silence, the city fading behind them. Why Marfa? She asked eventually. Because it's quiet. And weird. And honest. They arrived at sunset. Everything was dust and color and sky. The kind of place where the air doesn't feel fake. They stayed in a tiny off-grid cabin that Elon had designed years ago, solar-powered, internet-free, full of hand-drawn blueprints and analog synths. No screens. No headlines. Just stillness. That night, over a small campfire, Ava stared up at the stars. I know they're not wrong, she finally said. I was born into everything. I've had every advantage. So what right do I have to lead something like this? Elon didn't answer immediately. He poked at the fire. You've got the wrong question, he said. It's not about what you were born into. It's about what you're willing to give up for something bigger. Ava swallowed. I gave up a lot. But maybe I should have done more. He looked at her. You gave up certainty. Safety. Legacy. Most people born into that never leave. You did. That matters. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ava said softly, I just want to be seen for the work. Not the name. Elon smiled. Then keep working. Eventually, the work speaks louder than the noise. They returned to Austin 2 days later. Ava posted a video. Just her. No edits. No music. She sat on the floor of her apartment and said, I wasn't raised poor. I didn't struggle the way many of you have. I've never claimed to. But I've chosen a harder path than the one handed to me. That doesn't erase my privilege. But it does define my values. If you believe in what we're building at EcoMuse, join us. And if you don't, that's okay, too. But don't confuse my background with my commitment. I'm here. I'm working. I'm staying. That video got more engagement than her original launch. The tide shifted again. Not because she proved anything to the world, but because she stopped trying. She just showed up. As herself. They drove again, this time not to escape the noise, but to follow a feeling. 3 days after Ava's video went live, things had stabilized. The internet moved on, as it always does. Some trolls stayed, but the people who mattered, the artists, the dreamers, the real ones, they stuck around. EcoMuse didn't just survive the storm. It grew in it. Still, Ava needed something. Not more noise. Not applause. Just, meaning. So when Elon said, there's something I want to show you, she said yes without asking what. They left Austin before sunrise. No itinerary. No GPS. Just a direction, west. By afternoon, they were in New Mexico, surrounded by nothing but sky and sand and silence so big it made your thoughts feel small. They pulled off a desert road near a forgotten town and drove until the road turned to gravel, then dirt, then nothing at all. Elon parked. We walk from here. Ava followed him. No complaints. Not today. They hiked a mile under the beating sun, until finally, they crested a low ridge and saw it. A lone grand piano. Right there, in the middle of nowhere. No walls. No stage. Just an old, sun-faded black Steinway standing tall against the wind, its legs slightly uneven in the sand, its bench cracked and crooked. Ava blinked. Is this real? Elon smiled. As real as it gets. He stepped up to it, brushed a bit of sand from the keys, and sat down. Then, without a word, he began to play. And for a moment, the world held its breath. It wasn't a flawless performance. The piano was a little out of tune. Some keys stuck. But the feeling? The truth in it? Perfect. It was something raw and low and aching, like love lost in a place no one remembered. Like pain that never found words. Like everything he never said, poured into keys and desert air. Ava sat down on a flat rock, mesmerized. He played for almost 10 minutes. Then silence. Wind moved around them like breath. I came here once, he said finally, his back to her. Years ago. I was done. Burnt out. Thought I'd sold my soul chasing rockets and headlines. She didn't speak. Just listened. Someone told me about this piano. Said no one knew who brought it here. Some believed it was a sculpture. Others said it just appeared one day, like magic. He turned to look at her. All I know is that when I sat at it, something cracked open. I didn't have words for what I felt. But I remembered why I started. He paused, running his fingers lightly over the keys. I come back every few years when I need to feel that again. And today. I thought maybe you did too. Ava stood up, walked slowly toward the bench. Can I? He nodded, sliding over. She sat beside him. No music in front of her. No sheet. Just silence and sun and memory. She played a simple melody, nothing fancy, just a repeating pattern of chords that felt like breath. Like beginning again. Elon joined her, echoing her notes with quiet harmony. No words exchanged. Just two people sharing space and something deeper than advice. When they finished, neither said anything for a while. Then Ava asked the question that had lived in her chest for weeks. What if I lose this? Elon looked at her carefully. The company? No. Me. This version of me. The one that finally knows who she is. He exhaled slowly. You don't lose her. You remember her. Over and over again. She turned to him, eyes glassy. Even when things fall apart. He nodded. Especially then. They walked back at sunset, the piano growing smaller behind them until it vanished in the dust. When they reached the car, Ava turned one last time. You ever think about moving it? Elon shook his head. It belongs right where it is. If you want to find it, you've got to go looking. She nodded. Got in the car. And for the first time in a long time, her heart felt quiet. Back in Austin, Ava didn't talk much about the trip. But the music they played? She remembered every note. She started leaving early mornings open to play again, sometimes alone, sometimes with Elon, sometimes with the team. They didn't rehearse. They just played. Let the sounds shape the space. Let it remind them why they were building anything at all. And on the wall of the new EcoMuse workspace, she hung a single photo. A grand piano. In the middle of the desert. No caption. Just truth. The email came on a Thursday. Subject line. Keynote invitation, Futurefront Global Summit. Ava opened it, read it twice, and stared out the window for a long time. Futurefront wasn't just another tech conference. It was the conference. The Super Bowl of innovation, where presidents shared stages with billionaires, and product launches changed the direction of entire industries. It was the place where her father had once been king. And now, they wanted her. Keynote. Prime time. Not as someone's daughter. Not as a footnote. As Ava Cole. She told the team the next day. The reaction was mixed. Riley, her operations lead, hugged her with tears in her eyes. This is the moment. Sam, her quiet but loyal developer, just nodded and said, earned. Elon. He gave her that same look he'd given back when she nearly accepted Dorian's offer. Big stages amplify everything, good and bad, he said. You ready for that? Ava didn't answer right away. Was she? She wasn't sure. Preparation began immediately. PR firms sent pitch decks. Stylists reached out for wardrobe options. Everyone wanted to shape the narrative, spin her journey, script her speech. But Ava had learned. This time, the story would be hers. No ghostwriters. No corporate gloss. Just a blank page and her truth. She spent 2 days in silence, writing. Then rewriting. Then throwing it all away. She kept coming back to the same question. What do I say when the world finally gives me a microphone? On the 3rd day, it hit her. She didn't need to give a TED talk. She needed to tell the truth. About failure. About walking away. About what it means to give up everything in exchange for something real. The night before the speech, Ava couldn't sleep. The hotel room in San Francisco was too cold. Too bright. Too clean. She paced, restless. At 3:14 a.m., her phone buzzed. Elon. Come to the roof. Bring your headphones. She obeyed. When she got to the top, he was waiting with 2 lawn chairs and a thermos of tea. They sat in silence, watching fog roll over the bay. How do you always know? She asked. He shrugged. You get quiet when you're about to do something brave. She looked at him. What if I freeze up tomorrow? He smiled faintly. Then we'll both play piano and pretend it was intentional. She laughed. Seriously. He turned serious. You don't need to prove anything. You already did. Just show them who you are. The next morning, Ava stood behind the curtain as a voice boomed through the arena. Please welcome the founder of EcoMuse. Ava Cole. Thunderous applause. She walked out under the spotlight, heartbeat hammering. Over 10,000 people in front of her. Cameras. Industry leaders. And in the front row, her father. Of course he came. He hadn't called. Hadn't emailed. But he showed up. That was how he loved, if at all. Silently. Visibly. Ava stepped up to the podium. And didn't read her script. She put it aside. I grew up thinking success meant building bigger empires than my father. A pause. Then I tried. And it nearly broke me. She looked at her hands. I lost friends. I lost money. I almost lost myself. And the whole time, I kept asking, when do I become enough? Silence. Turns out, the question was never when. It was where. Where are you when you feel most yourself? Where are you when the noise fades and all that's left is what you love? She smiled, remembering the piano in the desert. I found that place, eventually. And it didn't come with stock options or private jets. It came with an old keyboard, a few brave friends, and a belief that the smallest voices often have the loudest truth. A beat. EcoMuse isn't about tech. It's about meaning. It's not built on code, it's built on choice. The choice to create. To care. To commit when no one else will. She looked out at the crowd. If you're building something right now that people don't understand, keep building. If you're walking away from everything because your gut says there's something better, keep walking. The road is real. Even when it hurts. Then. And if you're lucky, somewhere along the way, you'll find a piano in the desert. The crowd didn't cheer right away. They stood. One by one. A standing ovation not because she dazzled them, but because she saw them. All the misfits. All the burned-out builders. All the people trying to create something that mattered. Even her father stood. He didn't smile. But he clapped. That was enough. Backstage, Elon waited with a smirk. "You said the thing." "I said my thing." He nodded. Same difference. Later that night, Ava posted a photo of the future front stage to her socials. Just one line. "I brought the fire. The world brought the wood." The announcement was cryptic. Just a black and white image of a piano on a stage, with a caption. One night. No speeches. No sponsors. Just sound. Hashtag the performance. No one knew what to expect. Not the tech bloggers. Not the music critics. Not even Ava's team. Only 2 people understood what was coming. And they weren't saying a word. The venue was a minimalist warehouse space in downtown Austin, bare concrete walls, soft overhead lights, and a Steinway grand piano center stage. No banners. No logos. Just a sign taped to the front door. Leave your phones. Bring your silence. Inside, the chairs were full, artists, entrepreneurs, students, skeptics. Even Dorian LeClaire showed up, trying, and failing, to look unbothered. At exactly 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. And Ava walked out. No microphone. No introduction. Just presence. She was dressed simply, black slacks, white shirt, hair pulled back. Behind her, Elon followed. Quiet as ever. Calm like the moment before thunder. They sat side by side at the piano. No words exchanged. Then, they played. The music started soft, just a few tentative notes. Broken rhythms. Unresolved chords. It felt like loss. Like doubt. Like the first steps away from something too familiar. Then Ava shifted. Her part grew more confident, melodies looping with purpose, light piercing through dissonance. You could almost hear the sound of waking up. Of trying again. Elon met her there, echoing themes from earlier, anchoring the chaos with structure. His fingers told a different story, calculation, resilience, and hard-earned peace. They moved like mirrors, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. At one point, the tempo dropped. The notes turned jagged. That was the fight. The public failures. The days Ava nearly quit. But they didn't stay in that space. Slowly, together, they built something new. From broken phrases came full, rising themes, emotional, cinematic, soaring. Not flashy. Just true. The music swelled until it sounded like possibility. And then, just when it felt like the piece might explode. It stopped. Dead silence. No final note. No resolution. Just space. And in that silence, the audience sat breathless. Not because they were confused. But because they felt it. Everything. The journey. The pain. The fire. After what felt like a lifetime, Ava looked up. "We told the story," she said softly, finally breaking the silence. Without selling it. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. Quietly. Some with tears. Some with awe. Everyone changed. Because it wasn't a performance. It was a message. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to feel it first. And then, invite others in. That night, no one posted a single video. Not one photo leaked. No bootlegs surfaced. It became a moment, the kind that lives only in memory. Like thunder that comes from the ground up. Like music played into open air, then carried off by wind. A week later, Ava sat in her studio alone. EcoMuse had doubled in users. Investors were finally calling her. But the best thing? A letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. You didn't inherit anything. You earned it. You made me feel again. That's more than money ever did. Thank you. She didn't know who sent it. Maybe her father. Maybe a stranger. It didn't matter. It was truth. And truth always finds its way home. On the studio wall, she hung a single frame. Inside it, two things. A photo of that piano in the desert. And the sheet music from the final performance. Untitled. Because some stories don't need names. They just need you. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?